I usually don't like movies that predate anywhere around the 90s. I feel like a lot of movies from around them suffer from the same problems that I don't like to watch as a viewer. Most of the time that I'm recommended a movie from 25-ish years ago, I'll write it off and probably never even watch it. And that mentality is what I originally thought of Ferris Bueller's Day Off. But this movie struck a chord with me that I haven't had since like the first time I watched Infinity War. I literally watched this movie like 4 hours ago and I already want to rewatch it. Don't get me wrong, this movie is fucking dog shit, and it has just about every single problem that I find in these old movies that I don't like. Yet to me, unlike every other movie I've ever watched before, this is not about the story or the plot. It's about the message that it tells. This movie is about living life to the fullest, living in the moment, what it means to be free, and what it looks like to be confident. All of these messages and the way that they're presented is exactly how I want to live my life, and I feel like a majority of people would also want that kind of carefree, confident lifestyle, especially if it's the opposite of what you have now. This movie starts with a young Matthew Broderick playing Ferris Bueller, faking sick to his parents so he, his friend, and his girlfriend can skip school for that day. His sister's pissed off that Ferris is actually about to get away with faking this, but instead of Ferris, being stuck up or worried about it, he literally winks at her and internally says fuck you to her, because she's a bitch and trying to fuck up his plans, so like, oh, that's what we'd all do. After that, Ferris does this badass fourth wall break.
They bought it.
And then while getting ready for the day, says this iconic line which I didn't even know was from this movie that I know that you've heard before. This intro is so good because it shows the aura that this entire movie is going to have when really you only know two characters at this point, Ferris and his sister. And we also already know what kind of guy Ferris already is and what kind of bitch his sister already is. After that, Ferris calls Cameron to make sure that the plans are still going well over there, but he's being a bitch and complaining, saying he can't get up because he's tired and he's sick. But eventually he caves in and goes to Ferris's house. Eventually. But before all that, Ferris does another fourth wall break to say some cool shit again. This works perfectly in the exact same way that the opening does. We know all of what we need to do about these characters from just a few dialogue lines. But after Ferris and his friend meet up, his principal becomes aware that Ferris is most likely skipping and he's not buying any of the excuses that Ferris's parents gave for him. So, the principal of this fucking school literally ditches it as the head of a high school and goes to stalk this motherfucker down so he will finally be able to punish Ferris for all the cool shit that he does. He then sneaks his girlfriend out of school and they go around riding in Cameron's dad's 1991 Ferrari, which Cameron is fucking geeking about, by the way. They then go fuck around all day, they do a ton of cool shit, they get up to some badass things that I know all of us are dreaming about in our monotonous ass lives. Meanwhile, the principal is getting his ass absolutely handed to him while he's trying to catch the gang. I mean, there's a part where he gets like fucked up by a literal dog, and while they're all fucking around, Cameron is absolutely losing his mind at every opportunity and constantly stressing about the consequences that could come with some of the things that we're doing. After the day, the gang tries to reverse the miles that they put on Cameron's dad's 1990 fucking 16-1 Ferrari because his dad like values that car a lot and he knows the exact miles. But in the process, they literally drive the fucker off a cliff and completely fuck it up. Totaled. That's literally the story. It was 3 paragraphs that it took me to do that. Try explaining any movie that you know or like in 3 paragraphs. I probably also could have done it in 1 if I wanted to. Like I said though, the point of this movie isn't the plot, it's not the story, it's not the quality of the cinematic experience. Shit, it's not even about like being funny. So why is it good? Why would I even spend time watching this? Because of the character dynamics and the lessons of this story, not the story itself. Now this might be getting a little bit too deep for a movie that I almost guarantee came out before anybody watching this was even fucking born, but I'm gonna do this anyway. Ferris represents the person that we all probably wish that we could be. Confident, good-looking, dating the person of his dreams, popular, confident, well-loved, confident. He's literally the person that I wish I could be, that I aspire and try to be every single day of my life, and I feel like a lot of people can relate to that. His sister represents the type of person that would be jealous of the type of life that Ferris isn't afraid to live. She works so hard to get the things that Ferris almost gets given to him because of his outlook on life, but her problem is that she doesn't realize that it's his outlook on life that's giving him these things. Cameron, though, is a more accurate representation to the vast majority of people who will watch this movie. He's on his toes, constantly worrying about the future problems that might come, never been in a relationship, misunderstood by his parents, and always looking at what could happen. And the principal is the physical representation of everything that somebody like Cameron is constantly worrying about. The principal's really only character trait is that he wants to ruin what Ferris is doing. He wants to put a dent in his future. He goes to absolutely insane lengths, and I mean insane lengths to do that. The principal is the cause of what Cameron's worrying about. Cameron is the representation of those worries and us, and deep down he aspires to be more like Ferris, who we all should aspire to be more like. This dynamic is what drives the movie. I guarantee you that you can think of people in your real life that could represent Ferris or the principal if you wanted to. And in a way, those characters could probably also represent the voices in your head that tell you if a decision justifies its means. And that is why the movie is good, and I think why its message is so impactful to me. I really like the way that Cameron acts because I can see a part of myself in him. I used to be a lot more like Cameron, always on my own at home and worried about the things that I was doing, even though I really wanted to do other things but didn't because of the consequences or the opinions that other people would have. That's who Cameron is in the beginning of this movie. But over the course of this movie, after he realizes that he's not going to be able to reverse the miles on his dad's car, he has a perspective change. The thing that he could possibly ever fear most, the worst thing that could ever happen to him in that moment, happened. And because of that, every other problem that he might have ever had or has now in his life is now irrelevant in comparison. The problems that he faced now just become menial parts of his life that don't matter in the grand scheme of things. This is the development of the story. A similar thing happens to Ferris's sister throughout the movie, but apart from that, that's the only growth or change that this movie has. Everyone else stays the same, but the perceptions of those two characters and you are the ones that grow, and that's why the message is so effective. I also really like how well this movie balances its priorities. It's not trying to be a good story or memorable show, and it knows that. It's trying to teach you a message about life, and because that's its true focus over everything else, it does it so well. We really don't see any of the personality traits of most of these characters because it doesn't drive that message. We don't see what a normal life is like for these characters on a day where they aren't having a break because we can already fill that in. We know, based on our monotonous lives, what they most likely do when their days aren't like this. The kids go to school and the adults go to work, so on and so forth. But since the movie was made for people like Cameron, we don't need to see that. What Cameron's need is what a Ferris shows him. What Cameron's need is the ability to put things into perspective, understand that no matter how bad something can be, the next day will rise and the problems and conflict associated with that will eventually go away. This movie knows exactly what it's trying to do and who it's trying to do it for. But when you first start the movie, you probably wouldn't even notice that, because this is really just a cleverly disguised, impactful, and important message behind a fun, lighthearted 80s summer blockbuster. I also like that this movie is semi-realistic. Don't get me wrong, you could never do all of the things that Ferris does in this movie in a given day, and you especially could not get away with it. But this movie is framed as one day out of every day of your life. This movie isn't telling you that you can, should, or even could live your life the way that Ferris does, but you could every now and again. This movie even almost downright just tells this to the viewer in a scene where Ferris is talking about his future, how he has a job and how he has school and work tomorrow and how he plans to work over the summer and how he's going to go to college and eventually move out and start his life. Ferris, in my opinion, is actually pretty responsible, and if he were a real person in a real functioning world that needs workers and has priorities, he could probably get away with some, if not most, of the stuff that he's doing every once in a while. And the movie is telling you that you can do this through the eyes of Cameron. It's so fucking good. I used to be a Cameron. Back in 6th grade, I used to be scared to talk or make jokes sometimes because I knew that the people around me would make fun of what I would say. And I envied the popular kids around me who didn't have to think about the things that they were gonna say or people's opinions on them, or could make whatever jokes they wanted and people were gonna laugh because they thought they were funny. And they were funny. But like Cameron, I was too focused on the work in front of me to realize that the reason that all of this worked for them was because they weren't focused on the work. Fast forward to now, I couldn't even tell you what class I was in or what the fuck was even going on. I don't know what the assignment was. I couldn't tell you anything that even happened that day, because in the grand scheme of things, every other problem that happened on that day doesn't matter. Now, I've never had my own Ferris Bueller's Day Off day yet, but it took me until 7th grade where I finally lost a lot of weight to realize a lot of what this movie was saying. And it took me till 8th grade this year to fully internalize and understand these concepts of living to the fullest, what it means to be free, live in the present, and what it looks like to be confident. And as I'm writing this to you, I just finished my last day of middle school ever. And now I'm on to high school, and yeah, I'm a little nervous, and I'm actually pretty fucking scared. But you know what? Fuck it. It took me 3 years to realize these concepts, but I'm not gonna dwell on the past. Really, all I'm gonna do is take these concepts that I've learned into the future and have fun while I still can, because
life moves pretty fast. You don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
I love Kangro on YouTube. I love Kangro.